All right. Tonight we are on page XXIX. Ruthie Barger, Real Alcoholic.
What page is it, Miss Ruthie?
XXIX. Middle of the page. Men have cried out to me. Last week we just went through two important paragraphs of the big book. And this was where it talks about men and women drink essentially because they like effects produced by alcohol. This is such a beautiful description. This is such a beautiful description of the disease of alcoholism. And if I was to want to write about alcoholism, you can't say it any better than what these two paragraphs does. And it talks about that being required to follow a few simple rules. And those few simple rules is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we are taking it up from there. And again, I'd like to go over about the craving. The craving comes after you pick up the drink. Even Alcoholics Anonymous has nothing to offer in a defense for the phenomenon of craving. Once you buy a ticket, you got to ride it all the way out. The obsession is what comes before we pick up the first drink. And that is your mind having the ability to make you believe a lie. The alcoholic lie is always the same. It goes something like this. This time, it'll be different. And we buy it. We buy the lie. The obsession is what the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to deal with. When we have that lie going through our head, we go through them 12 steps. And those 12 steps will allow us to get rid of that obsession. It'll make you see the truth. The truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. And that's what we can say about the disease of alcoholism. So now we're ready to get into talking about this phenomenon of craving, the obsession of the mind. And I think that every alcoholic on the face of the earth should have a tattoo on his forehead. All action is preceded by a thought. Whether it be a conscious thought to go in the front door or a subconscious thought that sneaks in the back door, all action is preceded by thought. Okay? We set ourselves up many, many, many times and don't even know we're doing it. So let's get into the book.
Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, "Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me." Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date, favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book.
Now we are going to talk about Dr. Silkworth is going to tell us about 5 classifications of alcoholics. There are more. And there are some alcoholics that have 2 classifications. So as we go through these classifications of alcoholics, see where you might fit in.
There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type.
That's
They are
number
always
1.
going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends, and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. Oh,
did you see any of yourself in any of those classifications?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much we'll find ourselves in one of them. Okay, now
these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity.
Now, please note here, it is not setting a time as to when this is going to happen. Now, quite possibly, I might be able to go home tonight, do the 5:30 drive-through, get me a tall boy, drink it on the way home, get away with it. Don't wreck no cars, no DUIs, no fights, no nothing. Go home, sleep it off, I'm good. I got away with it. What do you think I'm going to be thinking about all day tomorrow? I drank a beer. Nothing happened. I'm not going to be able to think about anything but the fact I had a beer and nothing happened. I could probably do that. You know, I probably ain't even alcoholic. I've been making way big deal out of this thing, you know. I probably ain't even alcoholic. I don't need to go to them meetings. Yeah. So can we see how this can happen? There is no time, and there are some people that can go after they succumb to the desire. They have that one beer through the drive-through at the 534. They might be able to go a month and not have another drink. But somewhere down the road, let me promise you that first drink is going to bite you in the ass. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the engine that gets you, not the caboose. Okay? So let's see what happens here.
It has never been, by any treatments with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism.
This man that they brought in is a gentleman by the name of Hank Parkhurst. Hank Parkhurst turned out to be one of Bill Wilson's best buddies. They later went into a business, and they were making automobile polish. And it was called Honest Dealers. And Bill and Hank they were hanging tight, making a little bit of money, and had a good relationship going. Both of them alcoholic. Everything's going good. Well, this is how Hank came into the program.
He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol.
Now he's going to talk about a gentleman by the name of Fitz Mayo. Fitz Mayo is the author of the story Our Southern Friend, back in the big book, in the story section.
Need a mental uplift. I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis, and deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party, and in desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so
Patty,
complex and his
open
depression
up the
so
door.
great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, M.D.
Okay, William D. Silkworth would not allow his name in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous until after his death. And that was sometime in 1951. And that's when he would allow his name. But we have to remember that when this was written, we had 100 sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all of them were located in Akron, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and New York. And this book was going to be sent to places where there were no sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this book had to do everything. Prior to 1935, nobody knew anything about alcoholism, alcoholics, didn't know nothing about them. It wasn't it was right before, say, the 1918 or so. They were drowned in alcoholics right along with the witches because they thought they were one and the same. You know, alcoholics, ever since man crushed his first grape, we've had a problem with alcoholics. We've never been able to fix them, control them. So what we tried to do is just lock them up. And for a long time, we had places called asylums. And this is where they put the mentally ill, the people with brain injuries, the slow learners, and the alcoholics. Because we didn't know what else to do with them. Just lock them up and keep them locked up until they die. So, but in 1956, the American Medical Association did recognize alcoholism as a disease. And when the American Medical Association recognized alcoholism as a disease, and please keep in mind, when Dr. Silkworth wrote the doctor's opinion, it was 1938. And we know today the doctor's opinion is no longer an opinion. It is fact. There is nothing that we can say against the doctor's opinion that the AMA has not accepted as being reality. But what the American Medical Association did do with alcoholism is they didn't have really a whole lot to say about it, other than alcoholism, number one, was primary. Primary meaning that it is not a symptom, it is the disease. They said that alcoholism was progressive, meaning that it keeps going. As we sit here tonight in this room, our disease is progressing. And if you think you can go out and pick up a drink and pick up where you left off, wrong. No. You're going to pick up where you would be if you had been drinking all along. You don't pick up where you left off. You pick up where you have been if you never had drank, because your disease is progressing even as you sit here tonight with no alcohol in your system, because it is a disease. It keeps going. It can be arrested, but it can never be cured. The AMA says that alcoholism is fatal. It will kill you. Yes, it will. If you continue to drink, you will die. And number 4, that it is treatable. The AA program over the last 85 years has been successful in treating alcoholism. So it is treatable, but it cannot be cured. Okay? So that is going to bring us up to Bill's story. You're not going to find this anywhere in the big book, but I'm going to give you Bill Wilson's sobriety date. He got sober on December 11th, 1934, in Charles B. Towns Hospital, Park West, New York, in New York City, New York. Bill's story is here as a 12-step call. Bill's story is here for identification. Bill's story is here as an example. Bill Wilson was one of our 2 co-founders. Our other co-founder, Dr. Bob Smith, his story is the first story in the series of stories that happen after the 164 pages. Okay? So Bill was 43 years old when the book was published. He was 3 years sober when he started to write this book. And I think we can get in to see what Bill had to say about himself. And it starts out at 1914.
Chapter 1. Bill's Story. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone.
You know, for many years I told people that Bill's first spiritual experience was when he was tied up in Towns Hospital, and he called on God, he didn't believe, and he showed up. I really thought that that was Bill's first spiritual experience. But, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I did find out that Bill's first spiritual experience was when he was 21 years old. And it was here in Westminster Cathedral. And he tells us that they landed in England. He visited Winchester Cathedral, and much moved, I wandered outside. Bill had a spiritual experience inside Winchester Cathedral. So he comes outside, much moved, and his attention was drawn to a doggerel on an old tombstone.
Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22, and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last.
So he's 22 years old. He's had his first spiritual experience, and he's headed home.
I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation? My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises which I would manage with the utmost assurance. I took a night law course and obtained employment as investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceived their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived.
I had heard a lady say at a big book study that Bill Wilson never graduated from high school. And I was a little upset about that because I did know Bill's history. And I'm going to tell you the truth about Bill's education. Bill did drop out of high school his senior year because he had had a relationship with one of his classmates. And Bertha was taken by her parents up to New York to get an operation on something very serious. And Bertha ended up dying. And Bill went into a very deep depression. And like I said, he did drop out of high school. But later on, Bill did get a GED. When he came home from the war, he started taking night law classes. And he says that he almost failed his night law class because he was so drunk. But Bill did go to the whole thing of his law degree, except the formal crossing the bar, which is nothing more than a ceremony. Bill was, by all educational purposes, a lawyer. But he did not cross the bar, which is a formal ceremony that's necessary for you to become a lawyer. So Bill never went back to cross the bar because he got tied up with Wall Street. And Wall Street really caught his eye because he could see how people was making money hand over fist. I mean, taking just a little bit of money and the next day they're millionaires. He liked that. That was his cup of tea. So Bill never went back to his being a lawyer because he wanted to be on Wall Street. So that's where he's at right now.
By the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons.
Now, I got to tell you about it in the 1920s. You know, Bill was raised by his grandfather, and his grandfather had told him about a boomerang. And the boomerang had to be made out of a certain kind of wood. And there had to be a certain measurement, and it just so happened that the headboard on Bill's bed was this same particular kind of wood. So Bill took his headboard off of his bed and whittled himself out a boomerang. And this boomerang really did work. So I guess you could say that Bill Wilson was the first white man to ever use a boomerang. And this was a weapon that they used in Australia. And here was Bill. And isn't that strange that he would say that that this drink would turn on him like a boomerang? Quite a play on words, huh?
Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements. but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle. The sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of a financial reference service. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculation, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital.
That was July 25th of 1925.
That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year.
Okay, we're going to stop right there for tonight. And I do want to point out to you that Bill and Lois headed out on a motorcycle, and I will tell you that Bill rode a Harley. It was a 1919 Harley Davidson. But I will tell you that Lois did most of the driving because Bill was too drunk and he spent his time in the sidecar. So next week we're going to start up here with the next few years, and we'll maybe finish up Bill's story. So with no more from me.